I got the Weavile. Cool. I can make that video now. I figured it would come up eventually. So yeah, I feel like this is gonna be a bit of a weirdly structured video. Because, truth be told, I don't remember that much about this event myself. I remember bits and pieces of it. I remember that I didn't like the event, but I remember that it happened, so... We are talking about the North Pole dungeon. So what is the North Pole, exactly? People might be asking. Because they may have seen Pokemon with the North Pole location being posted in Global occasionally. Totally not by me. So what is it? So the North Pole was an old Christmas event. It ran in the years 2015, 2016, and 2017. It was a co-op dungeon designed for, I think it was 2 to 4 players. Not too sure about the 4 part, but definitely the 2 part, because it was definitely a co-op dungeon. It was designed for levels 51 to 100, and within the dungeon, it had its own list of wild Pokemon that could be caught there. Now, there's not really a lot of footage of the North Pole. There is some footage of it on YouTube, but there's not really a whole lot of it, because, if I'm being honest, it really wasn't that popular of an event. But the general aesthetic of it was that it looked very similar to Seafoam Islands and Icefall Cave, in that it used the same texture set as those 2 locations. But yeah, I almost want to say that the location was also semi-randomized. I'm not sure. I know there were like different maps for the North Pole, but I can't remember how it actually functioned. I can't remember if it was all like procedurally generated or what, based on the maps that were used. But what I do know is that the event was discontinued in 2018 because, as I said, the event wasn't very popular. In order to do the event, you basically needed to be a rich endgame player, which didn't really appeal to a lot of people back then. Shocker, I know. But you basically needed level 100 competitive Pokemon to go through this event, and a lot of people were not happy about this. So the event got discontinued from it. But yeah, so within the dungeon, there was a list of Pokemon that could be caught there. Now, I don't know the full extent of the Pokemon that could be caught there. I have a relatively small list based on the Pokemon that I have personally been able to find, and other Pokemon that I have seen mentioned on the forums based on some searches that I ended up doing. And that list ends up compiling to Golbat, Golduck, Piloswine, Slowbro, Glalie, Sneasel, Vaporeon, Delibird, Jinx, Sableye, and Walrein. There might be more, I'm not sure, but that's the list that I have at the moment. So that's what I'm going off of. But yeah, so why exactly are North Pole Pokemon such a rare novelty? The answer is fairly simple. The answer being that people were trying to get through the dungeon as fast as they could, as efficiently as they could. And part of this efficiency within the dungeon that was still relatively long, even keeping at a decent pace, you needed to remove the factor of the wild Pokemon encounters entirely. And the easiest way to do that? Repels. People were going in with level 100 Pokemon and repelling their way through the dungeon, because that was the fastest and most efficient way to get through it. But yeah, so what are the chances that this event comes back, this location? What are the chances of it? Based on a forum post that Kiyu made in regard to people asking whether this event would come back, I'm gonna say it's fairly low that it would come back. It's not quite a 0, but it's pretty low. But yeah, so now I'm actually in-game and I'll be going over the method that I used to find these North Pole Pokemon, at least a section of them. But before I do that, as you can tell over there on the left, I've been busy. And this month has been especially lucky because I got not one, not two, not three, but 4 this month. This is by far my luckiest month in-game, and I don't know if I'll ever replicate this kind of luck. Anyway, to the Poke Center. But yeah, so now we're back at the PC, and all of these here, all of these are North Pole catches. They're not my OT, but they are North Pole catches that I have been able to find on the GTL. For fairly cheap too. These things get listed like very cheap. I think this North Pole Vaporeon was the most expensive one, and it was like 200k. I think the only reason is because the guy was using it as a Ditto catcher. So it was like 200k. This was the most expensive one. Most of these were in the range of like 4k to 15k. They get listed really cheap if you can find them. Whether that ends up staying true after this, we'll see. But yeah, I've been able to find these pretty underlisted, I feel. But yeah, so the general method for finding these that I've been testing, because all of these are within the same month, the general method that I've been using, I kind of hinted toward it a bit throughout the video. See, if you go to the GTL, there won't be any listed because I've already kind of picked through it before making this, because I was looking for the Sneasel, which I basically found the Sneasel. By the way, this is a very expensive Sneasel. It's got a Premier Ball. These were not cheap back then. But yeah, so I went over some details that would give you a general idea of how to find these. And it's fairly simple, right? So you go to Advanced Search, and as I stated, the dungeon was recommended for 51 to 100. That's your level range, right? Pokemon in the North Pole generally were within this level range. I think it was something like... yeah, I think it was something like levels 53 to like 90. I think 90 was the upper end of how high level these things could be. But it was generally within that level range. So from there, I mentioned that the event ran from 2015, 2016, and 2017. Now, generally, I find that the North Pole Pokemon that get listed are from 2015 and 2016. I have yet to find any from 2017, and I think that's just because that's when the mass amount of people were using repels, so they weren't really coming up as much. But if you wanted to find them, you would have to go 2015, 2016, and 2017 on the catch year. And that gives you lists like this. See? So this gives you a general list here that you can effectively scan through one time, right? Because there's only 2 pages, there's only like, what is that, like 1.5 pages of listings? Yeah. So you can go through here, look at the catch info of all of these that are here. And once you get to the back end of these pages, all you have to do is look at the first page and see if anything sticks out, like this wall right here. If it were North Pole, which, I mean, these can be North Pole, it would say North Pole here, and these generally stick out because of the level range that you picked. And you go 2016, there are 4 pages total. So you go through here, you look at all these things, and then you just look at the first page after that and see if anything sticks out. Nothing is really going to stick out here. And like I said, I don't really ever see any from 2017 get listed. I'm sure they happen, but I'm not sure how common those would end up being compared to the other ones that I keep finding. And like I said, these things generally end up getting listed for very cheap, and I'm not sure if they're being underlisted. I feel like they are, but I'm not sure. But yeah, that was the basic gist of everything that I wanted to go over in this. Like I said, I don't know what kind of market there are for North Pole Pokemon. I've mostly been buying them because I feel like they're fairly cheap compared to how rare they most likely are. So that's the main reason that I've been doing it, and at this point I've gotten the main things that I was looking for. So I don't feel quite bad giving this information out and potentially missing out on future snipes. It's fine. I'm more interested to see what ends up coming out of it if I do end up putting something like this out. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'll probably be doing more basic recordings, maybe even some streams, I don't know, because at this point, I'm actually finding shinies again, which is shocking to say the least. Granted, these have all been like 5 times hordes, even this one was like a 5 times horde, but the point is that I'm actually finding shinies again. So it might be a good idea to just record out of paranoia at this point. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna go now. Be back whenever I have a talking point, I guess.